And I also want to bring in CTV News public safety analyst Chris Lewis. He is also a former commissioner for the Ontario Provincial Police. He joins me now. Chris, it was only a matter of time?
It was. I mean, we knew that obviously there was going to be an end to this, or we hoped there would be an end to it at some point. It's sad that two more people are dead in terms of their families, but at the same time, a tremendous relief for the communities, for the officers involved. A lot of tragedy here all around, from the communities that these folks are from, to their families, to the victims in particular, and their families and communities at large. It's just been, but it's nice to see some closure to it.
Yes, and the commissioner mentioned that there will be relief for those communities that, went to bed at night locking their doors in towns where they're not used to locking their doors. But I guess what's lost in this, unless we learn more information from the RCMP, if there was some kind of note or communication at the scene, is why. Will we ever know motive, Chris?
We may not, unless they made some sort of note, like you said, or had some communication with somebody earlier on when they still had cell phone signal that we don't know about yet. We won't know why. What's going to be interesting to me, in addition to the cause of death, was it a double suicide? Was it a murder-suicide pact sort of thing? Or was it the elements themselves? What evidence is there with them? Was there anything to link them to the crimes? Particularly the case that there was no charges laid yet in relation to the young couple. Anything to link them to that scene, either something they kept in terms of, almost like a trophy sort of thing, or something they stole from there that would link them to that, so that those crimes could be officially solved too, because technically they're really unsolved murders at this point. But the other thing is as well that the RCMP aren't saying a lot yet, and they hadn't said much about that search and what they found along the water on the river, but at the same time, they thought there might be into a criminal trial at some point. Well, that's obviously not going to happen if, in fact, this is the bodies of who we think they are. So they should be able to say more to let the public know, not worrying about that eventual criminal procedure.
Yeah, that's interesting. They were on the run for nearly 3 weeks, no confirmed sightings since July 22nd. It just reiterates how dense this brush was and how unkind the brush is in terms of searchers looking for them and perhaps suspects trying to hide in them. They were not familiar with this area, even if they had some sort of wilderness training from BC and Port Alberni, where they grew up. It's much different terrain in Manitoba.
It is for sure. Now, if the officers had searched near them at any time prior to this with canine units, they may well have picked up a scent. The thermal imaging equipment they use with the aviation assets works very effectively. It would often pick up something the size of a wolf that's lying there decaying. But if with thick foliage overhead, if it's really dense, it's not going to pick it up through that. So you could walk through it, walk right by somebody crouching and hiding. Would not necessarily work for the dogs, but it would for humans. And it's just a hard to explain even what that's like for searchers, let alone wondering if the person behind the next tree's got a gun and trying to kill you. Yeah. I mean, so the dynamics of all of that is tremendously stressful physically and emotionally.
So, Chris, you touched on this earlier. We know they have been charged in connection with the death of university lecturer Leonard Dick, who was 64 years old, and so they've been confirmed as they're the ones charged with his death. But as you mentioned, the deaths of Lucas Fowler of Australia, who's 23 years old, and China Deese, who's 24 years old from North Carolina, what might link police to them? Because they're only named as suspects in their deaths. What would it take to have conclusive evidence that these two men who were found today were responsible for the deaths of this young couple?
What they'll be looking for is some evidence to link them either to the two deceased persons or to that scene. For example, if there's some transfer of hair or fiber from the deceased to the killers, or vice versa, whether they kept something, stole anything, whether it be a knife or some memento of some sort, but something that investigators can say this evidence links these two people to these two people or to the murder scene. So, I mean, it's going to be difficult. Those bodies are likely not in great shape. There may be animal devastation as well as just the results of the elements. But through forensic testing and the larvae of bugs and a whole pile of other things that forensic scientists will look at, they should be able to narrow it down to an approximate day, give or take a day or two. But the most significant thing during those forensic examinations, in my view, is going to be to solve those other two murders and prove that we don't have other killers on the loose.
Right, and that was my point, is it, not just, for that reason, which is an important one, but for the families of China Deese and Lucas Fowler, who obviously as well would like to know. And I'm just asking you, I guess, what's the likelihood of the secrets going to the grave or this crime going unsolved? Do you have faith that there will be something that connects these two young men with this murdered couple?
Well, I like to think positive and that there will be in this world with forensic evidence and DNA. I mean, if they left some DNA at the scene or there's any DNA from the suspects on them, whether that be hair or whatever the case may be, then fingers crossed. But I was also kind of hopeful that these two guys are going to be found much sooner. So, it's all been really a guess at this point. And I really do commend the RCMP. They've taken some heat in the media for not finding them sooner. Well, these are very difficult operations. And I think we should be proud of our national police and the job they've done in trying to bring this whole thing to a safe ending.
Chris Lewis, a former commissioner for the Ontario Provincial Police. Appreciate your expertise as always, Chris. Thank you.
Always happy to help. Thank you.